Hey, what's up there, YouTubers? Adjumant sent a job come to you guys here today with another deck tech. So today we're going to be taking a look at a standard deck, and it is Bug Midrange. So it's a blue, black, and green deck. Now, this is actually a rogue homebrew that I have, so it's not something that you're going to be seeing in the tier 1 meta just because nobody's discovered it, nobody's been playing it. This is just something that I recently came up with, and I've been having a ton of fun playing this for standard. The biggest thing about running any rogue or homebrew is just the fact that if you're playing in tier 1, you already have a good idea of what you're going to be playing against based on what your opponent's colors are and some of the other cards that they're playing throughout the duration of the game. But they really can't have a grasp on what we're playing just because it's not a deck that they've seen before, so we kind of have the advantage with that. So I think that's the best part of running any custom-built decks, any ideas that you have, putting them into practice and making your own deck. I think that's the best thing about it, just because nobody's going to know what you're playing. So before we get to breaking down this deck, if you guys have any suggestions for decks that you would like to see, please leave them down in the comments below. Alright, so the first thing that we're taking a look at here is the land base of the deck. So we have 24 lands, starting off with a playset of Overgrown Tombs. So the shocklands are really important in the deck because we are running Mutilate. We have a playset of those. We have a playset of Watery Graves. And they both bear the dual subtype of Swamp, so that's important for Mutilate. We have 3 breeding pools. We have a playset of Woodland Cemetery. We have 3 Hinterland Harbors. And then we only have 2 Drowned Catacombs and 4 Swamps. Like I mentioned just now, the Swamps and the Shocklands are going to be important because of Mutilate. You want to have a decent amount of Swamp cards or Swamp lands in your mana base. So having the 4 basic lands and the 8 Shocklands ends up giving you a nice way to play around Mutilate, especially because we're running Farseek in the deck, so we can actually end up searching for even more Shocklands that are Swamps in their dual subtype. The one thing about the mana base was that I was originally running 4 Drowned Catacombs, and I ended up dropping 2 of them so I could add in 1 more Breeding Pool and 1 more Hinterland Harbor, just because I wanted a little bit more green mana in the base. So originally it was just 2 Hinterland Harbors, 2 Breeding Pools, and then it was 4 Drowned Catacombs, and I ended up just switching that around. But it ends up working really well now. We get the appropriate mana when we need it, as early as we need it, and it just works really well. So I like the mana base as it is. Now we're going to take a look at everything else here. So we have Vampire Nighthawk, and Vampire Nighthawk is going to be a playset for us here. He has Flying Death Touch and Lifelink, and he's a 2/3 for 3. Ultimately, he's going to let us gain back a lot of life pretty easily, especially early on, which is going to counteract the Duskmantle Seer that we have in our deck, but at the same time, he makes for a good blocker up against any aggro-based decks. He poses himself as kind of like a removal element on a creature as well because of the Death Touch, so he's pretty good for that. I'm also running Dreg Mangler in the deck, so he's a 3/3 for 3 with Haste and Scavenge. The Scavenge isn't as relevant. I have used it a few times here and there, but Dreg Mangler is ultimately really nice because he just lets you slow down aggro. He's a 3/3 for 3 body, and if you want to be more aggressive with him, you can use the Haste on him and start swinging in on your opponent. So, playset of Dreg Mangler for us here. And moving on, we have Duskmantle Seer, so 4/4 for 4 with flying, and he has Dark Confidant's ability, essentially, for both you and your opponent as well. So at the beginning of your upkeep, each player is going to reveal the top card of his or her library, lose life equal to that card's converted mana cost, and then they put it into their hand. So with Duskmantle Seer, it's going to let us get a pretty good advantage over our opponent, just because if they have a lot of high cost cards, or even if they have a lot of low cost cards too, it's going to start chipping away at their life total pretty easily. We already have the means of gaining back life between Vampire Nighthawk and Thragtusk that we have here, so it's not really going to pose that much of a problem for us, and our our curve doesn't go up that high, or our converted mana cost curve. It ends at 5, so we don't have to worry about losing a massive amount of life. But Duskmantle Seer is really good because it lets us have card advantage, and it can also potentially put our opponent in a rough spot by losing life. So I definitely like the Duskmantle Seer, and I think he's really good. On his own, he's just a 4/4 for 4 that flies and bashes in and deals damage, so I like that as well. But yeah, like I said, we have the Thragtusk in here. So Thragtusk is a playset. He's a 5/3 for 5. When he enters, we gain 5 life. When he leaves the battlefield, we get a 3/3, which is pretty solid. So Thragtusk for bashing in our opponent's face or having a big blocker sitting around for us. I'm also running Consuming Aberration in the deck, which a lot of people would just kind of laugh at, but this guy is actually really, really nuts. And I'm running 2 of them in here. So his power and toughness are equal to the number of cards in opponents' graveyards, which we're running a lot of removal. We're also running Liliana of the Veil, so that's going to kind of promote the bigger graveyard based on her first ability to make our opponents discard. So Consuming Aberration is good for that. Whenever you play him like turn 5, turn 6, he's going to be pretty big already just because of all the removal elements and everything that you're able to do. And whenever you cast a spell, each opponent reveals cards from the top of his or her library until he or she reveals a land. Then they put those cards into their graveyards. So Consuming Aberration is really solid. I really like him in the deck. The thing I like the most about him is the fact that he's dual colored. So things like Ultimate Price aren't going to kill him, and most conventional removal that like red decks have isn't really going to be able to deal with him. Our opponent's going to be able to like Oblivion Ring and Detention Sphere him, but we also have our Abrupt Decays, so we can just get him back pretty easily. But he's pretty rigid as far as a creature goes, and he gets to be pretty big, and kind of as a slower win condition, we can mill out our opponent pretty easily, actually. And he also survives Mutilate. That's the biggest thing about him, is he survives Mutilate because he's big enough to survive Mutilate. So 2 Consuming Aberrations there. And now we're getting to the non-creature things. So we have our Farseeks. So Farseek is a playset for us here. We're also running Liliana of the Veil. So Liliana of the Veil, like I mentioned, it's going to promote the discard of our opponent's hand. So +1, each player discards a card. -2, target player sacrifices a creature. So those are the 2 biggest things that we're going to use it for. And -6, we get to separate our opponent's permanents into 2 piles. They get to keep one, and the other one goes away. They have to sack it. So that's not bad. I definitely like Liliana of the Veil. She's really powerful, and like I said, there's a definite synergy with an early game Liliana and a mid-game Consuming Aberration. We're also running Garruk Relentless in the deck, so I'm running 2 of them here. So he's a 4-cost Planeswalker. Essentially, the biggest thing with him is he can be removal for us. He can deal 3 damage to target creature, and that creature deals damage equal to its power to him. So it's kind of like a small-scale removal. It's not the most efficient thing, but if you need it, it's there. But ultimately, he's going to create 2/2s for us. His other 0 ability is to create 2/2 wolves, and I don't really have him flip very often. It's either he's there or he's not. So he can create 2/2s, and Garruk Primal Hunter doesn't work in this deck because we don't have enough green going on for us. We also have 1 Vraska the Unseen, so 5 loyalty, 5-cost Planeswalker. Her +1 doesn't really protect us that well, just because if creatures deal damage to Vraska, they're gonna die. But the -3 is really solid, which this is in Japanese, so you guys probably can't read it, or at least most of you won't be able to, but I know the ability well enough. I just like using foreign cards. The -3 is going to destroy target non-land permanent, so it's almost like it's Vindicate, but it's like a little bit worse. But the -3 lets us get rid of other Planeswalkers, other enchantments like Detention Sphere, Oblivion Ring. It lets us get rid of creatures. It just hits into anything that is really annoying for us, and I like Vraska just as a one-up. Then we have our removal elements in the deck. So we have our Tragic Slip. So we're running 2 Tragic Slip, playing off of Morbid. Early game, it can get rid of small 1/1 creatures like Stromkirk, Noble, Champion of the Parish. It gives it -1/-1, but if we hit into Morbid, it's -13/-13, which is pretty solid. We also have one Victim of Night to destroy target non-vampire, non-werewolf, non-zombie creatures. So it's a little bit more specific, but it actually hits into a lot of things as well. So I like Victim of Night for that. We have Ultimate Price, so I'm running 3 Ultimate Price here to destroy target monocolored creature, which, again, there's a lot of them in the format, so it ends up being pretty good. I'm running 2 Abrupt Decay, so Abrupt Decay gets rid of non-land permanents with converted mana cost 3 or less, and it can't be countered. And then we have 2 Mutilate, which gives all creatures -1/-1 until the end of the turn for each swamp we control. So if our opponent's running a heavy aggro build with a lot of creatures, we can end up dealing with a whole lot of them with that Mutilate. So I definitely like that, and that's the main board that we have here. So for our sideboard here, we have Duress. So Duress is going to be a 3-of in our sideboard. And it lets us look at target opponent's hand, and we are going to be able to choose a non-creature, non-land card from it, and that player has to discard it. So Duress is really nice because we can set it in against a control by taking out like our removal elements because they won't be as relevant for us. Duress lets us look at their hand, get rid of planeswalkers, any like sweeper effects, or any negate cards that they have, like negate or counter spells, anything like that, dispel or dissipate. So Duress is going to be good for that, to where we can actually find things that our opponent's going to be able to use and we can make them discard it. So Duress is really nice for the control and also the mid-range matchups, like Jund Midrange. So 3 Duress. We're running 1 more Mutilate if we need it for a more wide-scale removal package for us. It's going to be a little bit more aggressive, and it may get rid of our own creatures, but ultimately making aggro not have dudes is the thing that we want to do. We also have Ground Seal, so this is a 2-of. Whenever it enters the battlefield, we draw a card, and cards in graveyards can't be the targets of spells or abilities, so this is mainly against Reanimator and pretty much nothing else. It's a way to have Unburial Rites not be able to do anything, so 2 Ground Seal for that. We are also running Deathrite Shaman, so 3 Deathrite Shaman for control and for Reanimator as well. So for control, we're able to start exiling their instants and sorceries from their grave, and we can make them lose life. But against Reanimator, we can start exiling their targets for Unburial Rites, like Angel of Glory's Rise or Angel of Serenity, stuff like that. Even if they're running the more traditional Reanimator, we can start dealing with like Thragtusks and some of the other creatures that they may try to reanimate. But ultimately, Deathrite Shaman is good against control to outrace them, and Reanimator to just kind of stop them from doing anything. So 3 Deathrite Shamans there. I'm also running Jace Memory Adept in the sideboard for kind of like a more traditional, a more transitional approach to how I play the deck. Not traditional, because this deck is not very traditional at all, but it's very transitional because we can side into Jace Memory Adept against control, and we can just start milling them out. And he's a 5 cost for Loyalty Planeswalker, and essentially his 0 ability is what we're going to use the most, mill them for 10 each turn, so 2 Jaces for that. I'm also running 1 Aerial Predation because there are a decent amount of good flyers in the format, but the biggest thing is being able to deal with cards like Olivia Voldaren and Thundermaw Hellkite. Now, we already have Ultimate Price that deals with Thundermaw Hellkite, but we don't really have a huge amount of ways to deal with Olivia Voldaren, especially not Victim of Night. So Victim of Night is something that I end up siding out for Aerial Predation whenever it comes to the Jund mid-range matchups. So I like Aerial Predation for that. It just deals with flyers, and we get to gain back a little bit of life. So 1 Aerial Predation there. And then the last card is Negate. So we're running 3 Negates in the sideboard as well. So counter target non-creature spells. So the deck is going to take a more defensive role whenever we're playing up against any control-based decks, because we can just start negating their stuff. We can negate their planeswalkers, or like if they try to resolve like Terminus or something like that, which oftentimes they're going to be playing around Supreme Verdict anyway. But if they have a sweeper that is going to be able to be countered, we can use the negate, or anything that's really a problem for us, we can just end up negating. And it's also good up against the mid-range decks like Jund Midrange. Jund Midrange ends up being a nuisance for a lot of decks, and having negate in the sideboard, especially like when we already have that mid-range kind of style to it, having the ability to run negate is really powerful in this deck, and I really actually like it. So 3 negates in the side for more non-creature heavy mid-range decks and control alike. So that is the main deck and the sideboard for us here for Bug Midrange. So if you guys enjoyed it, please be sure to like, favorite, and subscribe for more Magic the Gathering content. I invite you guys to test out this deck. It's a whole lot of fun. The entire deck list is down below where you guys can check it out and use it as a reference. And there's also a playlist to all the previous decks that I've covered on the channel, so please be sure to check that out as well. And until next time, guys, have yourselves a wonderful, fun-filled Magic the Gathering day.